Hmm. Hey, Adam.
Yes.
Do you have access to WSI still?
Uh, kind of. Why? What's up?
Uh, I'd like to pull up NOTAMs. Oh, maybe the format that is on the FAA page sucks. I want to pull them up raw.
Yeah. Um,
All
let's see here. Hold on 1 second.
right.
I'll message you the login stuff.
Okay, cool. Hmm. It's telling me that's wrong.
You say the login's not working?
Yeah.
How are you accessing it? You got to go through SkyWest Online.
Oh, okay.
That login's for SkyWest Online.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, here we go. Did he show you guys FDC NOTAMs yesterday as well?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, we got some good ones right off the bat. Okay, so we're going to start at the top of the list here. We're going to decode some NOTAMs. Let me see. Brandon, why don't you start us off right there?
All right. So 156th NOTAM of August. Salt Lake City nav instrument lighting system runway 17 out of service. From August 22nd, 2018 to August 22nd. Same day this year. Let's see here. From 1500 to 2100 Zulu time.
Good. So ILS stands for Instrument Landing System. So it's the navigational aid, right?
I thought I said landing. Sorry.
Oh, okay. It sounded like lighting. So
I don't know. Maybe
it's all
I don't know.
It's all good. So good job. So Brian, why don't you do that one for us really quick?
Can you hear me? Microphone's kind of bad tonight.
Yeah, it's working good.
Okay, so this is NOTAM 166 from August for Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City runway 34 right. The ALS, that's the, that's landing, isn't it? The ALS, isn't that the landing system?
Approach light system.
Approach light system out of service from August 22nd, 2018, 1400 Zulu to 2018, August 22 at 2000 Zulu.
Okay, good. So just a quick question for everybody. If you see this ALS NOTAM and you're trying to plan for runway 34 right, what is seeing the ALS is out of service? What does that do? Like, where does your mind start thinking? What does it do to our landing minimums?
It raises them.
Good. So it'll raise our landing minimums. So that means we've got to go and check, right? Make double sure if the weather's getting pretty close to low vis or low ceilings. We're going to go take a look and see what our landing minimums are, just to make sure we're still legal, right? So Casey, if you want to take a spin at that one.
So it's the 116th NOTAM in August, and SFO what is that? San Francisco or something?
Mm-hmm.
San Francisco, the navigation VOR. The DME I don't remember. Distance, is it distance with?
Distance measuring equipment.
Okay, yeah, that, and then the VOR distance measuring equipment, not I don't know what MNT means. Maintenance.
Monitored.
Monitored.
Mm-hmm.
And then so August 24th, 2018 is when that was recorded at 0600 Zulu, and then all the way until the same day at 1300 Zulu.
Yep. So it's not necessarily when it's recorded. We call this the validity period. So this NOTAM isn't in effect until that time period. So
Okay.
yep. Good. Katie.
Okay, it's the 114th NOTAM in August for San Fran. Navigation, instrument landing system on runway 28 left out of service. August 27, 2018, starting at 0700 Zulu till same day 1500 Zulu.
Good. All right, Wes, if you want to do this one.
It's NOTAM 103 of August in San Francisco, runway 10 right and 28 left. Closed daily from, so it means every day from 0700 in the morning until 1500 in the afternoon on the for the 22nd of August 2018 and the same time again 07 to 1500 in the afternoon.
Okay, good. But the following day, right?
Oh yeah, it's the fall. Yeah, the 22nd till the 23rd, so it's just 2 days.
Good. You can notice that I'm skipping a lot of these obstructions and taxiways and stuff like that. I mean, I hope he talked about the relevance of NOTAMs like that. You know, it's not really our job to tell the airplanes where they can and can't taxi, or
That's a tower, more or less, right?
The tower is going to talk to the pilot and tell them, or they're going to be issued from the tower an obstacle clearance or obstacle departure procedure. Rather than the procedure that we plan them with, they may get issued an ODP to get them out of the airspace. But a lot of times, yeah, the pilots, you know, that's their concern. It's not so much our concern at the end of the day. They're the ones that are going to know what that means, you know. Like PP1 between taxiway D1 and taxiway TT is closed. Why? I don't even know where that is in Chicago. So, you know, the pilot's going to know. The pilot's going to know that he can't taxi on there because there's probably going to be a big sign that says no taxiing, you know, or closed. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of those aren't going to be relevant. And when you're doing 55 flight plans a day, really, I mean, looking at San Francisco here with your flight planning, you know, doing our scan that we have to do on NOTAMs that we have to do for each and every airport that we look at. I mean, it's got to go fast. I mean, you got to look through it about that fast to really, you know, stay on top of things. You've got to be able to get through NOTAMs fairly quick. That doesn't mean that we don't stop when we find important ones. So, like, you know, I'd take a look at that one. I'd take a look at that one just because it says AD. In my scan, I just look. Can everybody see where my mouse is? Here we go. In my scan, I'm pretty much just looking at this column right here. And I'm looking for things, you know, keywords like navigation or aerodrome, airport, or runway, or, you know, things of that nature, because pretty much everything else isn't necessarily going to pertain to what we're doing as a dispatcher. So it's one of those things that takes time to get good at doing a scan through NOTAMs until you're good at picking, putting your eyes where they need to be. Go through and just do a little bit more thorough. I did a lot of highlighting when I was first learning. I would highlight just to make sure I was reading the important stuff and getting to the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the NOTAMs. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that we look at hundreds of NOTAMs every day, thousands, I'd even say. So you got to get good at scanning through, throwing away the stuff that doesn't pertain to your job, and just looking at the things that pertain to your job. So I hope that makes sense. And I hope Davis talked about it a little bit yesterday as well. So, Paul, I believe we're on yours.
All right, so it's the 671st NOTAM of August. The runway or the airport navigational LS instrument landing system, runway 27 left. The glide path is out of service from the 20th of August at 11:40 Zulu to the 10th. Yeah, 20th of August to the 20th of October at 2100.
Good. Good. Yeah, so this one's going to be out for a while, huh?
Yeah.
Good catching the glide path. So, again, what is this going to do to our landing minimums? Seeing a glide path out.
And then increase them.
Good. Remember, because we were looking at the precision and non-precision approach, we take away the glide slope that's given us our lateral or horizontal information. All of a sudden, all we have is the vertical, or I'm sorry. It's taking away our vertical, and all we have left is our horizontal guidance. So I was thinking of the needles, because the needle in the airplane, anyways. Yeah. So it's going to increase those landing minimums. That's the important thing to remember. Let's see, Preston.
So the 42nd NOTAM of August, O'Hare runway 9 right, 27 left. Clear markings obscured. Or CL, what's CL again?
Center line.
Center line markings obscured. And that's going to be valid through August 1st, 2018, 1544 Zulu through September 1st, 2018, 1100 Zulu.
Good. Let's see. Here's one that doesn't really matter. But we're running out of NOTAMs here. Oh, here we go. Never mind. Tara?
I don't remember what W or DFW means.
Dallas Fort Worth.
Oh yeah, that's right. So this is the 611th NOTAM of August, Dallas Fort Worth, runway 36 left. Pappy, that's the light system. I can't remember. But it is that light system, the one with the 4, is out of service from August 22nd. Sorry, I can't see very well. So from August 22nd, 2018. Oh, thank you. And at 0700 Zulu until the same day, 2100, or is it? Or 1000 Zulu.
Yep, so 10 Zulu. 10 Zulu.
10 Zulu.
Yep. Let's see. And Trevin and Tyler, do you guys have mics? I'm guessing that's no. Oh, wait, there they are. All right, Trevin, let's find you a good one here.
And 89th NOTAM of June, Dallas Fort Worth. The navigation instrument lighting system, runway 17C, the localizer, distant measuring equipment is out of service daily. I don't know what SSSR is.
Yeah. Sunset to sunrise.
Okay, that's cool. So yeah, it's from the 13th of June, 2018 at 0130 Zulu to the 31st of June, 2018 to 1300 Zulu.
Good. So, instrument landing system. Remember that one. Maybe I heard you wrong too.
Did I say lighting? Yeah, sorry.
You're good. And let's see. Tyler.
All right, so that's the 759th NOTAM of, what is that, June?
May.
Is that May? All right, May. The navigation at ILS runway 35 center. IM. I don't know what that is.
That's the inner marker.
Where is that?
So an inner marker, we don't use them anymore. But when they were doing the ILS localizer approach, they had an outer marker, which told them, you're over this point. Then they had a middle marker and an inner marker, and the inner marker was typically fairly close to where the missed approach point was. So,
okay. The inner marker is out of service from May 24th, 044 to November 16th, 1200 Zulu.
Good. All right. Y'all got it. So that's the first. Oops, that's the first part of your quiz review. Let's see here. Yeah. I'm going to shut off your screens again before I go back in there. You guys don't get to cheat. So if you see OTS, what does that stand for in a NOTAM?
Is it over the top ceiling?
Out of service.
Out of service. So it's the same as out of service, just Sometimes they abbreviate it, sometimes they don't. I might have to take a couple questions out of here. All right, let me take a quick look, see if I can find this. All right. So, you guys remember me showing you the 10-9 chart, right? The 10-9 alpha. You guys remember this chart over here on the right side of the screen that showed like the alternate minimums, landing or takeoff minimums as well up here in this corner.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Okay. Let's pull it up here. All right, so using this section, let's talk about a couple things. Okay, do you guys remember where we find our runway? Or like which runway are we talking about? Which column?
First one?
Yeah,
First column.
this first column right here, we can see that this is for runway 3 and 21. So why are they in the same box? Let me ask that really quick.
They're the same runway, just going opposite ways.
Good, same strip of pavement, right?
180-degree difference.
Yeah. So 21 is the reciprocal of 3, right? So it's the same piece of pavement. Does that make sense to everybody? So 10 right is also the same strip of pavement as 28 left. So anyways, okay. So which runways only have medium intensity runway lights?
3 and 21.
Good. And we can see that right here, correct? So which ones use which ones have center line lights?
10 and 28.
Both, all the other 4 runways besides 3 and 21.
Right, so 10 right, 28 left, and 10 left, 28 right.
Yeah.
Good. So which one has an ALSIF ALS? ALSIF 2 ALS.
10 right.
10 right.
10 right. So only one that we have what we would call category 2 landing capability, right? Because remember, our lighting system determines the capability of their landing. So Mausers, this is where we're going to see most ILS, right? ALSIF 2 also has an ILS. It's just Cat 2 capable. Maybe even Cat 1, I don't know. I'd have to look. So just kind of some things to think about when you're looking at these, right? What is this PAPI? What is that L and R next to it?
On the left or right side of the runway?
Good. So on runway 3, the PAPI's going to be on the left side. Runway 21, the PAPI's going to be on the right side, right?
Yes.
Good. Which runways are grooved?
All of them.
Good. We can see that right here.
What does that mean, grooved?
So, have you ever driven on
I-15?
I-15 up in Salt Lake or Bangerter Highway?
Yes.
You know how they've got those little ridges in the cement? That's grooved just like a runway would be. So what that does is there's like 1/4-inch grooves throughout the pavement to help with drainage, and it also helps increase traction. So grooved runways actually really help our landing performance. So it gives the aircraft more traction. Which runways have RVR capability?
10, 28, right and left.
Good. Right there. Okay. Which runway is 150 feet wide?
All of them?
All.
Good. Right there. And which runway is the longest?
10 right, 28 left. Oh, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So we're looking in this column. Oh, hold on. That's Clyde Slope.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
that looks wrong.
But most likely, that doesn't give us the actual runway length. Okay. But yeah, most likely this one would be the longest runway. Okay, good. Good. All right, we're going to look at another section of that same exact chart here. Okay. Looking at runway 28 left, 28 right. So this is our takeoff minimums, right? So what are the lowest possible takeoff minimums for runway 28 left, 28 right? Anybody?
The 1/4 mile.
1/4 mile is like 500.
500, 500, 500, right? So we're going to look. We're going to look right here. These are our lowest possible. But remember, it's predicated on something, right? It's predicated on everything working, correct? So 2 operating RVRs are required. RVRs controlling your center line and hurls have to be working, correct? So let's say that we have a NOTAM. So we've got PDX, and it says runway what are now what for 28 left, what are our lowest possible takeoff minimums at this point?
It's still a quarter and 555, right? Because we don't need the CL. We could use the hurls and the other one.
So which one are you saying? Can you say that again?
Yeah, it's still like our lowest ones, lowest minimums.
Yeah, what are the lowest possible minimums we can use if we have that NOTAM?
Is it now 1,000, 1,000, 1,000?
Getting warmer. Okay.
Isn't RVR controlling?
Yeah, but we're not looking at RVR right now. So
okay.
We're looking at this NOTAM and we're trying to apply it to our takeoff minimums, okay? So yes, you're correct. So it says right here, center line or runway center line marking and the hurls. So we're only missing the center line lights, right? If we have the runway center line marking and hurls, then these are now our minimums, correct? But notice that, let's say that our NOTAM, instead of center line light, it says HIRL. And then you also had, well, let's say we have 2 NOTAMs. The runway 28 left, let's see, 28 left. What I'm trying to get at is, like, if the center line lights are working by themselves, that's adequate, okay? But if we're going to use this part of it, the runway center line marking and hurls, then you are required to have both of those. So there's an or, but notice where the or and the and are in that section there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's like if they're on the same line, then they're together, but if they're above, like one's above the other, then it's an or.
No.
That's what it looks like.
So it says or right there. So if the center line marking's out, then we have to have both the runway center line marking and the hurl. So let's say that we have a NOTAM saying that the center line markings are obscured and the center line lights are out of service. We would have to go to adequate visual reference at that point, because the center line markings are required, right? But if they're obscured, can the pilot see them? No, he just sees black rubber on the runway, right? He doesn't see where the center line is. So this part right here requires the pilot to have both like functioning in order for him to use the 1,000 feet still. Does that make sense?
Now, what's the difference between centerline and runway centerline marking?
So the centerline lights, so there's that center strip, just like if you were going down a road, right? So that's the runway centerline marking, is those white strips, the white dotted line. And then at the end of each one of these lines, there's lights in the ground.
Okay, so the markings are just the paint, the CL is the lights.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
So does that make sense? Did I confuse everybody there, or does that all make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay, good. Okay, let's say that I have a NOTAM that says, let's see. So it's PDX again here, right? Runway 28 right. Oops, I'm sorry. I messed up. Let me erase that. PDX runway 28 right RVR out of service. Okay, at that point, what are my lowest takeoff minimums?
Well, 2 RVRs are required, so would you be legal to go?
No, so you would be legal to go, but it just requires different takeoff minimums.
Now, is this where you'd move to adequate visual reference?
It is. So at that point, we use adequate visual reference. So remember that to use this section as a Part 121 operator or Part 135, we have to have RVRs, 2 operating RVRs, right? So if we're taking off of 28 right and the RVR's out of service, we have to resort to adequate visual reference. Okay. So remember, 121, 135, we can use this. This is more for Part 91 flying. Part 91, I mean general aviation type flying. So this is the standard if you aren't a 121 or 135 ticket.
Now, I notice how it kind of moves from left to right through the columns. So furthest left is lowest possible if everything's working. Next column if something's not working, but still other things are. And then we lose the RVR. So will that typically be the way you read the chart, that you'll start in the left column for your best case and then kind of mid case, worst case?
Yep. So as a Part 121, 135 operator, if we look at the NOTAMs, and there's absolutely no NOTAMs affecting our runways, then we can always just go straight to this column here and call it good. Okay. But if lights start not working, or if, all of a sudden, well, pretty much, lights or RVR, we're going to start considering minimums at that point, regardless, right? Whenever we see lights out, whenever we see, for takeoff, whenever we see lights or RVR out, even landing, we're just automatically going to say this increases my minimums, period. Whether it's our departure, our alternate, our destination, it doesn't matter. We always just assume that we're going to have a penalty on our takeoff minimums or landing minimums. So, but yeah, I mean, that's typically how, I mean, that's the same exact way that our instrument approach plates do it, right? It's like you've got the full standard ILS on this side, then, you know, the ALS is out of service, then you got the section where it's the glide slope's out of service, but everything else is working, and then glide slope's out of service and lights aren't working, blah, 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 circle to land minimums that we try to avoid, right? So that's how everything is. It's like when everything's perfect, we're always going to be in this left column. Whatever chart we're looking at with these Jeppesen charts. That's a good point. I mean, that should help you guys understand how to read these charts. Whenever you get a test question that says, hey, something's not working, that should be a huge indicator to really take a look at your chart and make sure you're reading it correctly, because, you know, when something's not working, that's typically a tip-off on a test that it's not just the standard. There's going to be changes to it that you need to consider. So just kind of keep that in your mind when we're going into tests. So looking at that chart again as well, you know, and kind of going back to that, what is the standard takeoff for a 2-engine aircraft? What are our standard takeoff minimums for a 2-engine aircraft? Remember, we're looking at this box right here. They're all the same, but
2-engine aircraft is that 5,000 feet or 1 mile?
Yeah,
RVR
of 5,000 or 1 mile visibility. Okay. So we call this box right here. Let me clean things up really quick. We call this box right here our standard takeoff minimums. This box is less than standard, and this box is basically just like part 121, 135, okay? All right, so now we're going to look at an instrument approach plate and just take everything that I just said into consideration and apply it here. All right, so what are our lowest possible landing minimums?
$300 feet or a half mile. Oh, and half mile.
Okay, good. Let's say the ALS is out of service. What are our lowest possible landing minimums at that point?
$307.8.
Okay, good. So here's another pointer, a pro tip, pro Spatchen tip. So yeah, like in an interview, I'd probably read it as 307/8, but when you get into the real dispatch world, just always round up an eighth to the nearest quarter mile. Does that make sense? Because a weather report will never, ever, ever be given to you in an eighth mile. The only time that it's given is when it's actually an eighth mile, right? On a METAR. But if it's like anything above an eighth mile, it will not be given as in eighth mile increments. So half, 3/4, 1 mile is going to be 5/8 or 3/8, 5/8, 7/8. Just round them up to the next quarter mile. Does that make sense to everybody? That's just a pro spatching tip. That's when you guys actually get out on the floor. So.
Yep, makes sense.
Okay, let's see here. So what are the lowest possible landing minimums considering the glide slope out of service? Lowest Cat C. Somebody else.
Would it be 500 3/4 mile?
Close.
Maybe. No.
What's the number next to 420?
400 3/4 mile.
Good. So 400 and 5/8 or 400 3/4. So we use this number right here for our ceilings. Okay, so 400 3/4. Everybody good? You can put it down as 3/4 or 5/8. I'm not going to penalize you. I will penalize you if you put down 1/2 or 1 mile. But 5/8 or 3/4, we're good. Alrighty. That's pretty much what you guys get to do on a test. You guys feel good about it?
Yeah.
You guys starting to feel like dispatchers?
No.
Now that you can read now that you guys can read some aviation charts and stuff?
Oh yeah, we're pros now.
You guys are ready to hit the floor. Let's give you guys 60 flights a day. Forget 50.
With the NOTAM questions on the quiz, are we going to be able to use the abbreviation list, or will we have to just memorize what we can?
No, just it's pretty much with the NOTAMs. It's like I said, it's going to be something that directly affects dispatch. So it's going to be instrument landing system, approach light system, centerline markings, high intensity runway lights or hurls, things of that nature. Let me pull that test back up, see if there's anything really unusual. But I'm pretty sure that it's pretty basic stuff, We're not going to tell you guys so what is GP, everybody?
Glide path.
Okay. What is OBSC?
Obstruction or obscured?
Obscured. You guys are pros. You guys are good. What if it has let's say a N 1500 feet CLSD. What would that mean to you? And 1,500 feet CLSD.
North side of the runway at 1,500 feet is closed.
Yeah, so the northernmost 1,500 feet of the runway is closed. So everybody, does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So if you see like a north, south, east, or west, just know like N, northern, S, southern, W, western, E, eastern, right? And then it'll give you how many feet of the runway is closed. Is that gravy with everybody?
Yeah. Are there going to be any FDC NOTAMs on the test?
No.
Okay.
Cool.
FDC NOTAMs, well, those come into play when we start. I mean, if you can decode a NOTAM, like a regular NOTAM, a METAR, a TAF, at that point, you guys are going to be able to decode anything that an FDC NOTAM will throw at you. Does that make sense? So when we get to flight planning, when we've learned all of that stuff, we'll start applying FDC NOTAMs to our flight plans. But as far as being able to read them, it's going to be almost identical to anything that you've seen at that point. You guys will be pretty solid on abbreviations and everything. So you guys are probably the best NOTAM readers I've had so far. So pat yourselves on the back. Davis did a good job yesterday. Sounds like. All right. So today we're going to learn about airplanes and how they fly. Okay. So that's going to be your test. You guys are going to take that first thing tomorrow. Sound good?
Yeah.
Everybody good with that? All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it'll be the same exact thing you guys did last week, just different test. So study hard. You guys will do just fine. You guys sound like you're all ready for it. So before we jump into this PowerPoint I made, let's take like a 10-minute break. How's that?
Sounds good.
Good.
All right. So I'll see you guys back on at 6:45. Or actually, hold on. 6:50. I know for some of you, this may be a little dry, a little boring. Because I'm sure in your aviation courses you've learned about this stuff, but this is very important for those that haven't been in aviation classes. So we're going to go over, especially going into systems, because this kind of covers, you know, the aircraft itself, how it works, how it flies, and then, I mean, eventually, starting this week, we're going to start talking about how these different systems and basic parts of the aircraft are affected when something's not working right. So let's get started here. So lift and weight. How can an aircraft that's which is so much heavier than air be supported by that air? Right? So Sir Isaac Newton's third law states, to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. A vehicle weighing 1 ton is supported by the road pressing up with a force of 1 ton. A boat weighing 10 tons is supported by a 10-ton upward force of from the water, otherwise it would sink, right? So opposite and equal reaction, right? So let's talk about how it relates to an aircraft. Aircraft can only remain airborne while they are actually moving. If they stop moving, they cease to fly, right? They become rocks at that point. So how do we get that upward force to support the aircraft? And that's with the wings and the amount of air flowing over them. Okay. So to every action they're once again going back to the third law, the equal and opposite reaction. This upward force is generated by the aircraft wings as they pass through the air. So we kind of need to know how a wing generates that lift. So this is what we call Bernoulli's principle right here. Bernoulli was a scientist back, like the 1800s. And he did a wind tunnel experiment. So you can see you've got a column of air, right? You got air moving through at a velocity, a steady velocity. So let's say that he's pushing through the air at 50 miles an hour. Well, he found that as you constrict that vacuum, or that tube, that column of air, the velocity increases, but the pressure decreases as well. So, and then once you return it to its normal size, then it returns to that steady state of pressure and speed. But with that restriction, thing kind of important to remember is that with the restriction, as the speed increases, the pressure decreases. Okay, velocity increase, pressure decrease. Okay. That's just restating what I just said. So Bernoulli found that pressure decrease. So yeah, the air pressure at B will be measured less than the air pressure at A and C. So the way we can prove this, simple science experiment, okay? Take a sheet of paper, blow on the top of it, and you'll notice that the sheet of paper doesn't blow down, it will actually lift. And that's because the air moving across the top of the paper is moving faster than the air along the bottom of the paper. And so it causes, with the less pressure on top of the paper, it causes the piece of paper to lift. So you guys can try that with your kids, whatever. Kind of fun. So what did we do? We just shaped a wing so that the air moves faster over the top of the wing. See, the bottom of the wing is fairly flat still. You can see that here. Bottom of the wing is fairly flat. The wind moving over the top of the wind, we create that restriction, right? The wind moving over the top of the wing goes much faster than the wind going underneath the wing. So that creates lift. So like it says, all parts of the wing generate lift, some parts more than others. You have oncoming air coming onto the front of the wing, and as it moves over, once again, it accelerates over the top, decelerates, or stays the same along the bottom. So this illustration just kind of shows you, I don't know why it's messed up right here. Oh, there we go. You can see the parts of the wing that generate the most lift, and that's where the most curvature is. Okay. So the top surface here may generate up to 80% of the total lift. So all lifting forces, something kind of important to remember as well. I mean, you're not going to be tested on this stuff in this PowerPoint, but this is really good to know. So you can see the oncoming air, all lifting forces they're going to be 90 degrees 90 degrees off of the oncoming air. So there you go. Just some basic information there. So the point at which all the lift can be said to act is the center of pressure. Okay. So we're generating the most lift right here. That's the center of pressure. Kind of think of it as the center of gravity, but it's the center of pressure, right? So if you were to hold a ruler on your fingertip, the center would be the center of gravity, right? It's the same thing with a wing. The center of the wing is the center of pressure.
But on the top, not the bottom?
Yeah, so, well, no, not exactly. So it's going to be this red circle here. So I'm trying to think of the actual name, but it's like a beam that runs through the aircraft through.
It's called a spar.
A spar. There we go. That's what I wanted to say. I couldn't remember if the spar was like this section here repeated throughout the wing or if it was the actual center. So, my bad. All right, so there's a couple factors that affect how much lift the wing is producing. So airspeed, unsurprisingly, increases lift or decreases it, right? So something else to try with your kids, or you're out by yourself, you are a closet aviation geek. Stick your hand outside the window when you're on a freeway and just kind of change the angle of your hand. That's just like a wing. You can feel your hand generate lift as you change the angle up, right? It's the same thing with a wing. And then try doing the same thing when you're like doing 25 in a neighborhood. You can feel the difference. Okay. Oops. So that's supposed to say tripling. Doubling the airspeed gives you 4 times the lift. Tripling the airspeed gives you 9 times the lift. So it's by a factor of 3, right? So several factors. Airspeed, angle of attack. You can see that the angle of attack is something else that will affect our ability to generate lift. The angle of attack is the angle between the chord line and the wing, or chord line of the wing and the oncoming air. So you can see the chord line of the wing is this imaginary line that we draw through the wing, through the center. So the center of the front, center of the back, that's the chord line. Okay, so this angle here is our angle of attack. Okay, so as we increase the angle of attack to a certain point, we continue to generate lift, and we'll increase the amount of lift that we are generating. Okay. So once it reaches about 15 degrees, that's typically where we see a wing stall, unless the airspeed is overcoming that factor. Kind of going back to this. So stalling is where the wing stops producing lift, right? So as we increase our airspeed, we're basically generating our oncoming air, right? So as we increase our angle of attack, we have to increase the speed to continue to produce lift. But if we remain at the same amount of speed, if we remain at the same amount of power, I guess I should say, then at 15 degrees, that's typically where we'll stop producing that lift, right? So if the air density, if the air becomes thinner or less dense, the amount of lift is reduced. We see that at high altitude flying. Wing shape and area. Wing shape plays a big part, as well as the area. So the area is like how wide and by how long is that that wing. So here's some different wing shapes. Let's see. Oh, here. Yeah. So so the typical wing that we see on aircraft is going to be this X, right? This is our typical shape. But high lift aircraft, high speed aircraft. So both of these are basically high speed, low drag wing shapes. A lot of times you're going to find those only on military type aircraft, or yeah, pretty much that's when you're going to find them. Okay. Like I said, Y is a high lift wing section. You can see that huge bend in the wing, right? So it's really going to accelerate the amount of wind, accelerate the velocity of the wind moving over the top, right? So it's going to produce more lift. So what's the downside of producing more lift? Can anybody tell me that?
You lose speed, don't you? So you go slow.
So in aviation terms, how do we relate speed or that loss of speed? I guess drag. Okay, we call it drag. So we increase our drag, which means that we lose, like it's not capable of producing, it's not as fast, right?
But they also have wings on a lot of the bigger jets so that you could change the wing shape, so the angle of attack changes with just a flip of a switch.
Right. So we're going to get to that point, but yeah, we can change the shape of the wing in flight, right? We have different control surfaces that will manipulate the wing shape. So like I said, Z and W. So think about these ones. Okay. Look how flat it is. So your airspeed has to be a lot higher, right? So I mean, even where this one kind of spreads out a little bit more, it's almost equal on the top and the bottom right. You can see here that the point is aft of the point on the top, right? So this one is further to the back of the wing than the top. And that's how that increased velocity will generate the lift, because of the delayed curvature of the bottom part of the wing. But there's a reason for that as well, more than just speed. The other reason for that would be for, and it's going to talk about it here in just a little bit, I think, but for instability. The more unstable an aircraft, the more maneuverable it is, the more reactive it is. So on fighters, like fighter aircraft, like your F-18s, your F-35s, and things like that, they're extremely unstable. In fact, when the computer fails on the aircraft, the pilot's direction is to punch out or eject, right? And that's due to the fact that the computer is doing micro inputs on the wing control surfaces at all times because of how unstable the aircraft is. And that's how they're able to, crank the wings over or crank the aircraft over so fast, do those really sharp turns, really crazy maneuvers, right? Is because of how unstable that wing is. So we already kind of hit that point. So another way that we can produce lift is to drop some weight, right? So throw me out the side of the out the window. All of a sudden you're going to climb pretty fast because I'm kind of a heavy body. Okay, I'm a heavy body. Let's not sugarcoat it. So skydiving with me is a treat for the pilot once I get out of the plane. Let's see. So if we increase the amount of weight, we're going to descend. In steady, straight, and level flight, the lift force exactly equals the force of gravity acting on the aircraft, okay? So we call this equilibrium, right? Everything's in equilibrium. We're not descending, we're not ascending. We are in equilibrium. So thrust and drag. So if you notice, the first section was called lift and weight. This is thrust and drag. So I'm going to illustrate this really quick. for you guys. You can see that right. Well, you can see that on this picture, right? Lift, weight, thrust, and drag. So moving forward is thrust, pulling back, the force pulling back on us is drag. Upwards is lift, downwards is weight. Okay, those are our four forces of flight. You can see here another representation of it. We want to climb to our dreams, but reality keeps pulling us down. We want to move to the money, but the FAA keeps holding us back. Pilot joke. Ha ha. Okay. So thrust, that's how we go. That's how we fly, right? So we have wind resistance, right? Airplanes aren't necessarily super aerodynamic. They are, but they aren't. You still gotta make them big and fat sometimes to hold a lot of people. So that just means it needs stronger engines, right? Put a bigger engine on it. So every part of the aircraft over which the air flows produces drag, which resists the forward motion. So that's our drag portion. If thrust exceeds drag, the aircraft will accelerate. If drag exceeds thrust, the aircraft will decelerate. Right? Pretty logical. An aircraft in steady and straight level flight will have thrust exactly equal to the drag. So once again, equilibrium. As the aircraft's airspeed increases, so does the drag, right? All of a sudden, we've got more air molecules hitting the aircraft. Like everything starts pulling against us even more and more, right? So we saw that lift increases 4 times for double the airspeed, and increases 9 times for triple the airspeed. Doubling an aircraft's airspeed will quadruple the drag, and then tripling the aircraft speed will increase the drag by a factor of 9. So pretty much the exact opposite of what we saw. So we've got 3 axes on an airplane. Remember that airplanes are 3-dimensional. Airplanes live in a 3-dimensional environment as opposed to a car. A car is very 2-dimensional, right? Unless you roll the thing over, you're only controlling lateral movement, correct? 2-dimensional. So aircraft, we operate in a 3-dimensional environment. Okay. There is the center of gravity, right? On an airplane is where these 3 axes meet. So you can see that right there. That's the center of gravity. The lateral axis generally runs from wingtip to wingtip. Not generally, almost always. Wingtip to wingtip, okay? Don't remember that. That's stupid. Okay, this is what controls the pitch. The lateral axis or axis, however you pronounce it, tomato, I don't care. That's what is our pitch of the aircraft, the up and down motion of the aircraft, okay? The longitudinal axis, which runs from nose to tail, this is what controls our roll. So the left and right bank of the aircraft. And last but not least, the normal axis or vertical axis, it runs vertically downwards, okay? This produces the yawing motion of the aircraft. So have you ever felt like when you go into a turn, if the pilot's not, very good and autopilot's not on, you can feel what's called an uncoordinated turn. You can feel them a lot when you've got brand new pilots, student pilots. Uncoordinated turns. So what happens is the plane, as it rolls and banks, and as he pulls back on the stick, the plane wants to descend a little bit. The nose will want to descend. So you have to put an input in what we call the rudder to counteract that force. And so it helps keep the airplane coordinated through a turn. Okay. Think of yawing like on a boat, right? A little rudder on the back of the boat turns the boat left to right on the horizon. So an aircraft flying straight and level will regularly be disturbed by bumpy air or turbulence. And we'll talk about how turbulent, like what causes turbulence later when we get into meteorology. So this causes the wing to drop or the nose of the aircraft to rise or fall. So a well-designed aircraft will tend to go back to level flight on its own accord without the pilot having to make adjustments. This property is called stability. Let's see. Okay, so this illustration kind of shows you. As the nose goes up, the air moving over the tail surface goes down, equilibrium balances the airplane. The airplane's supposed to be moving, but it's not. Sorry, guys. I tried. Let's get through these slides. There, if I click really fast, you can see what I'm saying. It's supposed to move. Okay. So this is rolling once again. This angle that you see here, the wings aren't straight and level, like as far as like across the horizontal or horizon. This positive, we call this a positive dihedral, this shape here. So the wings kind of curve up from the horizon, right? Kind of like the hull of a boat. Think of it as the hull of a boat. When you have a boat that's flat on bottom, it's super unstable, like waves affect it pretty dramatically. But when you have like a boat with a deep V hull, they tend to be pretty stable and cut through the waves pretty well, right? It's the same thing with the plane. So this is a negative dihedral or anhedral. It's once again, the center of gravity though is going to be below. It's very similar to a dihedral, except for when you're rolling, it decreases the stability of the plane. So directional stability is controlled by the rudder. You can see the plane slowly moving. Oops, going back. Okay, so let's talk about the controls that affect our roll, pitch, and yaw. Okay. All right. So the control column and rudder pedals are connected to the flying control surfaces. Okay. The pilot uses these, are called elevators. Excuse me. The pilot uses those to control the pitch of the aircraft. Okay. And he does that by, as Hollywood says, pushing on the stick, right? Pushing or pulling on the stick. When he pushes on the control column or pushes it forward, the elevators move downwards, and that pushes the nose of the plane down. Okay. So the tail moves up, the nose pitches down. When he pulls back, the opposite happens. Okay. On the ground, the pilot has two rudder pedals. They look like brake pedals. Okay. So the pilot will push in on this side, and it will cause the rudder to turn to the left, which pushes the nose, or I'm sorry, this is backwards to me. So the left rudder pedal pushes the rudder or the tail section there, this little piece back here, to the right. No, I had that right. It pushes it to the left. Yeah, I had that right. It pushes it this way, which causes the nose of the aircraft to turn to the left. And then if he pushes on the right pedal, same thing, just opposite. Okay. Just like a boat. So to control the bank or roll, of the aircraft, you have these ailerons out here on the end of the wing. So as the pilot turns that stick left or right, the control column. So when I say the stick, inside the aircraft, we don't have steering wheels. We have what's, in most airplanes, we have what's called a yoke. Okay. And there's like the column here. So if you push that in, the nose will pitch down. If you pull it back, the nose pitches up. If you turn it to the left, the plane will bank to the left. If you turn it to the right, the plane banks to the right. And then the rudder pedals, if you push on the left pedal, the aircraft will move laterally to the left. If you push on the right rudder pedal, the aircraft will move laterally to the right. Comprende? Pretty simple. If you've ever played a flight simulator, you'll know what I'm talking about. Download one on your phone or something and just give it a whirl. See what we're talking about.
Pretty hard.
Nah.
Well, with me and my friends did it we even had a joystick to do it. It was actually really hard.
Yeah. To be coordinated and do it, yes, it's very hard. But you know, you can go down to like Bountiful Sky Park or St. George Airport or South Valley Regional Airport up here in Salt Lake. And you can, on the general aviation side, you can go and jump in a cockpit of like a Cessna 172, go for a flight, and they'll let you fly the plane that very first flight. Doesn't even matter if you have any experience, if you even know what an airplane is. They give you the stick and you can bank and, you know, crank and bank. So, yeah. But to do it coordinated and be precise with it, that's where it gets really difficult. Like watching those guys do like 8-point turns or eight-point rolls and, you know, things like that. The aerobatic pilots, it's extremely hard. So trim. So on the control surfaces, we have what are called trim tabs. They're just little tabs cut out of like the rudder. You also have a trim tab on the elevators, on the ailerons, and what it does is it acts opposite of the control surface. So let's say that we want the control surface to go up. This little trim tab here will go down. And what it does is it relieves the amount of pressure that the pilot feels in the cockpit. So it's just like counterbalancing, you know, kind of helping the pilot control the plane easier. Before they had these trim tabs, like that's why in like those World War II videos, you know, when they're going down and the plane's just screaming towards the ground, you know, they had a really hard time pulling back and getting the plane out of that dive. It's because they literally had to, they didn't have these trim tabs. And I mean, still, even nowadays, if you get into a really steep dive and the plane gets going way too fast, it's going to be hard to do it. But this is kind of, these trim tabs kind of think of them as, what is it called in a car? That makes turning a car really easy. Power steering. Think of it as like power steering for an airplane. Okay, it just relieves the pressure in the airplane. If you've ever had your power steering go out in your car, or if you've driven a car that's like 1970s, even 1980s or before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those cars are extremely hard to turn. Well, it's the same thing with an airplane. These trim tabs just help the pilots, kind of reduces their workload and effort. So it's the same thing on all of our control surfaces. Okay, flaps. This is what who was it saying? This changes the shape of the wing while it's flying. Okay. Wing which flies well at low speeds required for takeoff and landing would be inefficient at high speeds. The usual solution to this is to design a wing for its main task, then add flaps for use on approach and landing. Okay. All flaps increase the effective camber of the wing and therefore increase the lift. So if you watch on airplanes, on the passenger airplanes, they have this style where it like hydraulically actuates to the rear and then drops. This is where the angle change occurs, is clear out here. Okay. But once again, all of them do the same thing. It's to change the shape of the wing. Notice that you can have a normal shaped wing, and then with the flaps, it changes that camber to a high lift wing, right? So when we're going slower, like on approach to land, or say that we're really, really heavy and we're trying to get off the ground, we can change the shape of the wing to produce more lift at lower speeds in order to help us either take off when we're really heavy or to land when we're trying to slow down and come in and stop before the end of the runway. So like I said before, as you increase lift, you increase drag. Okay. So 15 degrees of flap improves lift at takeoff speeds. A shorter takeoff run is possible because the drag penalty of the 15 degrees of flap at lower speeds is very small. Okay. So you're not going to see an airplane go full flaps on takeoff, is what it's trying to say here. Typically, we just put in one notch of flaps and we're good, right? So 8 to 15 degrees, whereas at 90 degrees of flap, which would be ridiculous, that's a huge increase to the camber of the wing and therefore a huge increase to the drag. So it doesn't give us a very good cost to value or whatever, value to cost, or I don't know how to say that. It sucks, period. Okay.
It's not cost effective.
Yeah, it's not cost effective. There we go. Okay, so we can see here that here's our flap portion. Some aircraft are equipped with what we call a slat as well. And what that does is it is just like a flap. It just extends off the front of the wing and will be an even more dramatic effect to the camber of the wing. Okay. So typically in aircraft equipped with slats, they are going to be automatically tied in with the flap system. So as you increase the flaps, the slats will increase as well. So it also increases or decreases the stall speed as well. So super beneficial, super good, super nice. Okay. So let's talk about stalling really quick. So once the lift angle is increased to the point where it stops producing lift, you can see that the air begins to tumble and spill off the back of the wing, okay? Once the air is disrupted to this point, the wing is no longer generating lift. So what do? Scream. Hold on to our underwear, whatever. Okay. So, bad stuff. Stalls at slow speeds, like when you're on approach, really bad. Stalls when you're taking off, a high speed stall, even worse. Okay. All bad. Stalls suck. And yeah. So although the angle of the wing stall does not vary, the airspeed at which it does stall does change. Blah, blah, blah. So putting an aircraft in a turn also increases the stalling speed. The steeper the turn, the higher the stall speed. Okay. So what we mean by the higher the stall speed is, let's say in straight and level flight, the wing stalls at 90 knots. Okay. We put it at a 60-degree bank, all of a sudden our stall speed is now 150 knots. Pretty dramatic, but it's possible. So if you go less than 150 miles, that's what 150 knots, that's when the aircraft stops producing that lift and you fall from the sky. So gliding's our friend, right? It's not like those apocalyptic shows where all of a sudden we lose an engine on the airplane and we just fall straight down like a rock. No, that's a helicopter, okay? Helicopters do that. Airplanes don't. We have what's called a glide ratio. That means that we will, as long as we keep the nose pointed and slightly below the horizon, we can continue to glide and produce that lift over a certain distance. Okay, there's a flight. This is a really bad drawing of the US and Canada, but there was a flight that was coming from somewhere over Alaska, I want to say. But then they lost their engines and they flew like 150 miles without any engines and landed on some remote airstrip in the middle of Canada. But yeah, like 150 miles from 30,000 feet, they flew 150 miles. That's pretty freaking far, right? But they made it down safely because of their stall, or I mean their glide ratio. So it was like a 737 or something too. I mean, not a small airplane. So gliders either have no engine or do not utilize an engine when gliding. The force of thrust is not part of the equation. All airplanes are gliders when the engines aren't working. Forces acting on a glider's steady balanced flight are drag, weight, and lift. Gliders must pitch down and use part of their weight component to replace the thrust. Does that make sense? So the glide angle describes how far a glider can glide from a given height. The Viking glider is about 1 in 35. So for every 1 foot of descent, of going down, it moves 35 feet forward. Does that make sense? Pretty simple. That's a pretty awesome glide ratio. So this is talking about like a headwind versus a tailwind, right? So let's say that you have a 10 knot headwind. Okay. So here's our airplane, wings, right? Happy people on board. Not. That doesn't happen. Okay. Unless you're up in the cockpit, then you're happy. Okay. 10 knot headwind. Let's say we're moving 150 knots forward. Okay. So we're moving this direction at 150 knots. Our 150 knot with a 10 knot headwind all of a sudden becomes 160 knots of wind, or 160, I'm sorry, let me correct that. So it generates the same lift as 160 knots is what I'm trying to say. But our ground speed will be 140 knots. So it's producing 160 knots of lift, the same amount. It's producing the same amount as going 160 knots would, but our ground speed is slower. Okay. Now let's say we have a 10 knot tailwind. It just flip-flops, right? We're now producing 140 knots of lift. The same amount of lift is 140 knots, but our ground speed will read 160 knots. So it looks like we're going faster, but we're really not. Like the airplane is performing, or I mean the stall speed, it's kind of deceiving, right?
Hey, Garrett, I have a question kind of between this and when we were talking about airspace and basically the speeds you fly in the airspace. So it's ground speed, not indicated airspeed, the 250 knots in Class B airspace. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if you've got a 20 knot tailwind, then you really have to throttle back to keep it at that speed level. So you're going to be losing a lot of. At what point do you lose too much lift? I guess for the question of the CRJ 700, what's the minimum indicated airspeed to maintain lift?
So that's dependent on a couple factors, right? Like, do we have flaps, things of that nature. But remember that 250 knots, this is indicated airspeed, okay? So anybody moving this direction will all be going the same exact speed, right? At 250 knots, if the pilot reads 250 knots in the airplane, every single pilot that's flying an airplane this direction is going to be going the same exact speed. Now, the airplanes going this direction are going to be going a different speed, but the point is that all the aircraft going this direction are going the same speed. So 250 knots, and that's why they do indicated airspeed, is because regardless, the direction of travel will always be the same speed. And depending on whether we're going, you know, that NEOD sweeping, the northeast, southwest, even odd flight altitudes, that's going to dictate, you know, they know that at 10,000 feet, the planes are all going to be doing this speed, but indicating 250 knots, and all the planes at, you know, 9,000 feet going the opposite direction are going to be doing this speed at 250 knots indicated. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay. So let's say, let's use the 250 knots here. Everybody's 250 knots. But we've got wind coming. So we've got a 10 knot wind moving this direction. Okay. So 10 knots moving opposite of this arrow that I just put here. You've got airplane A. Okay. He's at, all airplanes moving this direction to the left are at 10,000 feet. Okay. And they're indicating 250 knots. Okay. Even though they're indicating 250 knots, we know that they're really going 240 knots ground speed, right?
Right.
So their ground speed will all be 240 knots. But we know that, so air traffic control has our separations, right? We're all separated not only not only by spacing, but also by vertical separation, right? So all airplanes that are going to be going this direction, okay, are going to be at a different altitude. Let's say that these airplanes are all at 9,000 feet, but they're moving to the right here, the right side of our screen. We know that all of these airplanes at 9,000 feet are going to be going 260 knots because they have across the ground. So this is ground speed, right?
Yeah.
Even though they read 250 knots indicated, they're actually moving at 260 knots ground speed. So there's a 20 knot difference between the different altitudes, but all aircraft at that altitude will be going that same speed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I guess my question was, if you've got a significant tailwind and so you throttle back quite a bit, is there any danger of you reaching a stall speed? Or is like stall speed like down at about 130 knots, and so you've got a lot of margin of error?
So let's talk about like a KC-135 that's like, we call them a super heavy, right? So
Right.
It's got like a takeoff weight of 250,000 plus pounds, okay? So super heavy aircraft. Let's say that its stall speed is 270 knots, and that's ground speed, right? 270 knots.
Right.
And they're in that 250 knot or 200 knot restriction. Remember that the FAR states that if an aircraft cannot go that speed due to safety reasons, they can reject it. Okay, they can tell air traffic control. Air traffic control can come on the mic and say, hey, you're doing 270 knots indicated. I need you to throttle back. They can tell air traffic control, we cannot reduce our speed anymore. We will stall. And air traffic control goes, oh, super heavy. Yeah, I know. Okay, you're good at 270. You can maintain your speed. Does that make sense? So air traffic control and the pilots know their stall speed, and so they'll stay above those minimums, and they can stay above that minimum. There's that caveat in the FAR, but they can't just use it as a cop-out at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that actually makes a lot more sense to say that it's, you know, safety first and go the speed that's required for safety. But all things being equal, here's the rules.
Right. And really, almost 100% of the time, there are very few exceptions to the rule. 250 knots, nobody's going to be stalling out, even with a tailwind. That's a pretty safe. I mean, it would really take a strong tailwind to throw that off. But
Okay.
99% of the time, it's never even a factor. Because remember, if there's a really strong tailwind, typically those airplanes are on their downwind, just about to turn and go final. And so they're usually at a higher altitude anyways. They're usually, there's a lot of factors, but it's very much so all encompassing. I mean, it's very rare that that's even a factor.
Well, and I guess that was my biggest question is does it ever become, but it doesn't sound like it does. It sounds like actual stall speeds are probably considerably lower than that 250 knots.
Yeah, and I mean, think about the areas that we get really high winds a lot. I mean, very rarely do we get them at like Salt Lake International. We may get like a 40 or 50 knot wind. But think about like the plains, right? Chicago, 10,000 feet being our restriction altitude. When the pilots, so here's the runway. We've got, when they're lining up to go this way, this is what we call the downwind leg. Let's say they have to go down and around to do their approach. Typically, by the time they're here, they're still above 10,000 feet. They don't really drop below that 10,000 feet until they've started making this turn. They're about 5 miles out from the airport, and so I mean like I said, it's the exception to the rule. Very rarely does it ever happen. So, but I had pilots call me all the time and say, and I think I've used this example before. They're flying from Chicago O'Hare to Milwaukee, which is like an 18-minute flight. They're supposed to say at 7,000 feet is the altitude we give them. And it would say 288 knots or something on their strip. And they'd call me all the time. There's a mistake with the computer. I can't go faster than 250 knots, and I don't know why you guys always send this speed higher than that to me, for the planned flight speed. It's always less than 250 knots below 10,000 feet. And it's like, well, what we send to air traffic control is what your ground speed will be. So calm down, buddy, So.
Well, and the question just came up because fairly recently I was on a flight from Seattle to Denver, and we picked up a really strong tailwind. It basically put us like almost 20 minutes ahead of schedule. And we were basically landing on, I don't remember what the runway is, but the one that kind of goes east-west, and had to loop all the way around to come in. And I was just curious how all that came into play. Flying through the airspace, the ground speed, everything like that. So
yeah, and a lot of the times those winds that they pick up that really cut on time are going to be encountered at the cruise altitude, because we get into the jet stream, and that jet stream is at like higher altitudes, usually somewhere between like 25,000 feet to 40,000 feet. So 40, 45. So we'll go over that a little bit in meteorology and flight planning, but yeah.
Okay, sorry, didn't mean to waylay the conversation.
No. I like stuff like that. It gets you guys thinking, and it shows that you guys are thinking. So I don't mind going off on tangents and things like that. So
Yeah. Well, I used to have a job where I would fly. I would living here in St. George. I would catch the morning flight to Denver like once a week, and I know several times coming into Denver there was really high winds at low altitudes that were affecting approaches too. And so, I've been bumped around flying into Denver on more than one occasion.
Yeah, Denver's kind of its own animal. Denver sucks. I hate dispatching Denver. But you'll learn there's certain cities that just everybody hates because they always get screwed. Like somebody always gets screwed going into that airport every day, And Denver's one of those. You got San Francisco that likes to screw people over as well. And then like LaGuardia, JFK, Newark, they're notorious for it. And Seattle's getting bad. There's just some things that you're just like, oh, you see the flight on your desk at a certain time and you're just like, give it all the fuel, plan alternates, even if it tells you not to. So, so this is still kind of like talking about gliders specifically, but just remember an airplane is a glider. If the engines stop working, an airplane is the same exact thing with a glider as a glider. It's just rather than 1 in 35, his drop is like 1 in 10. So I don't know. It depends on the plane you're flying, of course, but it changes. So you guys feel better about airplanes? You guys feel like you're getting an understanding of how it all works?
Yeah.
Good. So let's do a lunch. So, hold on just 1 second. So, kind of to go along with what we've been talking about today. We need to address some important speeds. You'll find this document in the Google Drive. Okay. So, and types of aircraft. That's the other thing that we need to talk about. So for V speeds, V stands for velocity. Okay. So these speeds are really important for flight. So V1, and I would highly recommend you guys memorize these three. Okay. Memorize what it says here, word for word, exactly, nothing else. Really, there's like a crap ton of V speeds, but these are like the most important speeds in some of the most important speeds. Also, there's speeds that will affect dispatching. Okay, so V1 is our takeoff decision speed. So as the pilot is traveling down the runway, okay, he hits what we call the V speed or V1. Okay, he's going down the runway. At this point, let's say that he's flying a CRJ 700 and V1 is 134 knots, something around there. At this point, it's called the takeoff decision speed because he makes a go, no go decision at this point. So you'll hear, so the pilot takes off sometimes, the second in command, so the captain takes off sometimes the second in command takes off. Okay. The one that's not actually manipulating the controls doing the takeoff is calling out these speeds to the one that's actually flying the plane. And so you'll hear when you guys are doing your cockpit observation hours, you'll hear the captain call out V1. Okay, at that point, whoever's flying, whoever's manipulating the controls, makes a go, no go decision. So if there is anything wrong, let's say the oil pressure drops, let's say the N1 overspeeds or drops, let's say, just a plethora of things. Let's say one of the displays, the primary flight display in front of the pilot goes out. Anything like that where it's not safe to continue the flight at that point, they will stop the takeoff. They'll abort the takeoff, slam on the brakes, and hopefully at that point, the V1, it's safe for them to slam on the brakes, abort the takeoff, and get off the runway safely. Okay. So that's why it's called the takeoff decision speed, because you decide, am I taking off or am I not? Any faster, any delay to this, you're going to, if you slam on the brakes, if you abort the takeoff, you're probably going to roll off the end of the runway. Okay. VR is the rotation speed. So that's the next speed we hit on our journey for takeoff. So this is where the pilot that is manipulating the controls will pull back on the stick. Okay, so you hear V1. He decides to continue to take off. The next thing you hear is you hear them say rotate. That's when they pull back and they start creating the lift, right? Or climbing, I guess I should say. Front wheel comes off the ground, the back wheel slowly come off the ground. We're good. V2, okay, they hit shortly after the rotate speed. Pretty much, they're not even off the ground when they hit V2, really. Most of the time. But because their rotate speed's probably like 142, and their V2 speed's probably going to be something like 151 knots. Okay, so you're going, full throttle jet engines. You can see that the span of time between V1 and V2 is probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 10 seconds. Okay. So V2 is the takeoff safety speed. This means that the airplane, if it loses an engine at this point, one of the two engines, it can continue the climb safely and clear all obstacles at this point. So at V2, we lose an engine, we're still okay, right? That doesn't mean that if he loses an engine at V2, all of a sudden he's going to go and land at the original planned destination. No, he's probably going to turn around and try to land back here at this airport. But he can technically make it, clear the airport, get out of the airspace, continue his climb at that speed. So there you go. Those are the three most important in the dispatch world, because we actually, when we run our takeoff performance, we actually figure those speeds out. Okay. VLE, not important so much as a dispatcher, super important as a pilot. This is max speed at which they can extend their landing gear. Okay. VFE, max flaps extended. Same thing with landing gear. I mean, if you drop the landing gear too soon, you're probably going to break something. Same with the flaps. You're going too fast, you extend the flaps even one notch, you can cripple the airplane pretty quick. Okay. VMC, this is the minimum control speed. So this is, this is important when they're coming into land. That's something, once again, really means something to the pilot, doesn't mean something to the dispatcher. VA, this is the maneuvering speed. So let's say that they hit some really rough turbulence at altitude. You'll see the pilots throttle back a little bit, because what happens is at higher speeds, if you hit, think of it as like whoops. Have you ever seen whoops in motocross? Or like a washboard, I guess is what some people call them. Anyways, so if you go really slow over these, it's just like a nice easy ride, right? And you feel each and every one of these dips and rises. If you go really fast, you just skip across the top of them, right? But it rattles the crap out of you. Like it beats the snot out of the airplane if you're going too fast. So they've got this maneuvering speed, which it's safe to hit those bumps, the turbulent air, and damage won't occur to the aircraft. So it's like as long as you're going this speed or less, you're not going to cause damage to the aircraft. But if you're going faster than this and you hit too big of a bump, you're going to break something. So that's our maneuvering speed. VREF, so this is a landing reference speed. We also figure out this as a dispatcher. We don't care so much about it. You won't be tested on a VREF. But I know for a fact you will be asked these speeds, and you will have to recite exactly what they are. So V1, takeoff decision speed. VR, rotate. V2, takeoff safety speed. Did I say takeoff safety speed twice? That felt weird. Anyways, you guys get the point. Decision, safety, rotate. But there's, like, if you look it up online, I'll let you guys, if you really feel ambitious and want to go look up V speeds, have at it. But there's hundreds of different V speeds, just depending on the application, what you're doing, what the airplane's capable of doing, things like that. All right, so the other thing that we were going to cover was Group 1 and Group 2 aircraft. So this FAR 121-400 defines Group 1 versus Group 2. Okay, so Group 1, propeller driven. So reciprocating powered or turbo propeller. So reciprocating powers like your old World War II rotary engines that have, like, the pistons hanging out of the engine, and you've got your propeller here that's spinning around. Okay. Propeller driven. Turboprop is like the engine you have in your car with a propeller hooked to the drive shaft, directly to the drive shaft. and it has a turbo going to it. It's a whole lot like your car. Got your engine here. Let's do like a V engine prop. Then you got this little turbo somewhere in the airplane that's sucking in air from outside the airplane, accelerating it into the intake of the engine, which gives it really good performance. Okay. So really all you need to remember, Group 1's propeller. Group 2, turbojet. That's what we fly. We used to have a Brasilia at SkyWest, but they retired it. It's got to have been like 3 years ago. Something like that. They're pretty cool planes. There's a lot of companies that still fly them. This is an old SkyWest Embraer 120. Embraer also is the manufacturer of our new turbojet powered aircraft. There you go. That's a SkyWest United Express aircraft. Wonder if it's got like large. There we go. Yep, SkyWest Airlines. It's got a pretty paint job too. But yeah, they also make the new turbojet that we fly, the E175, Embraer 175. And that's a pretty little bird right there too. This is looks like Compass. Anyways, that's what they look like. They look like a miniature 737, I guess you could say. There we go. Delta connection. Yeah, looks like a little mini 737. But 737 holds like 180 people or somewhere in that neighborhood. This only holds 76 in our like biggest configuration. And I believe they're even reducing that down to 70. Like Delta really likes their first class. And so Delta just like said, make more first class, less economy. So they took seats out of the back, moved everything back, and put in a couple first class. But pretty cool little plane. We're doing flights that I thought a regional airline shouldn't do that, but we do it. Like we had one just yesterday. My brother sent me a Snapchat of BJX. It's that I'm trying to remember the name of that airport. Del Bacchio Airport. Guanajuato, Mexico. Let's see, maps. So here's Guanajuato. We're doing a flight from Guanajuato to Chicago, O'Hare, all the way up there. Like, I thought the Dallas to Seattle flight was long, and it is, but Guanajuato to Chicago. We also do San Francisco to Kansas City, San Francisco to Minneapolis as well. That's like, come on, Delta, you're cutting corners here. I don't know how long it's going to be before Delta, or before the FAA starts stepping in and saying, like, you guys are no longer a regional airline. But whatevs. It's got a good range.
SkyWest does one from St. Louis to Portland for Alaska.
St. Louis. So where's St. Louis at? I can't remember.
East of
Missouri,
Kansas City.
bottom of Illinois.
East.
Very bottom of, okay, right there. Yeah, St. Louis. You sure? St. Louis to Portland?
Yeah, I've been on it.
Oh, man. That's got to suck. Being in that small of an airplane for that long. I'm sorry, but I feel bad for passengers in economy. Because, you know, our SkyWest planes are cool and all, but, like, that's a long trip in that small of an airplane with one bathroom, 2 bathrooms if they let you into first class. That sucks. There's no easier way to put that.
Yeah, well, upgrades help.
Yeah, that's true. If you're in first class and it's all cush, you get the blanket and nice meal. But yeah, I mean, flying in economy with like a big old heavy dude when I'm a heavy dude and our shoulders are on top of each other and he's sweating and I'm sweating, and yeah, I would.
Sounds like romance.
Oh, it's a hot, steamy mess. It's all up in your business. I hated flying from St. George to Salt Lake in the back, you know? In fact, 9 times out of 10, I took the jump seat over sitting in the back. And let me show you what a CRJ 200 jump seat looks like. Well, here's the cockpit, right? I mean, hold on. Garbage. Little tiny pictures. Nobody wants that. Nobody's got time for that. Okay, there it is. What the? I chose large pictures, right? Okay. Yep, that's the jump seat in the CRJ. And it doesn't matter if you're in the 200, 700, 900. It's all pretty much the same. The 700 and 900s, you have like maybe an inch or 2 more legroom, but that's it. But my shoulders touched this wall and this wall, and I preferred this seat over a seat in the back. Every time. Oh, it sucks in the back. But it's not too bad. And you get a really, I mean, you're sitting straight up. It's a 90-degree chair. There's no lumbar support, nothing. I mean, it's like, that's how you sit the whole time. But, yeah.
The nice thing is we don't have to pay to sit like that, and other people do.
Yeah. That's true. I'd be more mad if I had to pay for that ticket, but one thing that you guys are going to learn when you start working for an airline is you get really snobby with seats. I know guys that, like, if they're traveling internationally, they will reject a flight, like they will not board if they don't get Delta One, you know? Like, not even first class at that point. If it is not Delta One, they will not go. So I was never that picky. Like, when I got the Comfort Plus, I was pretty happy. I never complained about it. But yeah. Anyways. Oh man, there's some cool videos there. Let me post this in the chat box here, if I can. And this will finish off class for tonight. I tried to, like, you know, fill up the rest of the time for you guys. But this video goes over, it's like the principles of flight. It gives you better visuals, and like everything that I always say, it might explain it different, might click better with a video rather than me going through a super dry PowerPoint. So now, so everybody plug that into your little interwebs and enjoy your 30-minute presentation on the principles of flight. And if there's no questions, I will let you guys go with the movie. And yeah. There you go. Tyler has my back.
Are we coming back after the video, or are we just watching it and then?
Nope, go ahead and watch it. Yeah, just go ahead and watch it. And then I'm just going to close down the GoToMeeting and get it converting so that I can post on YouTube. And I've got to prep your guys' tests and everything for tomorrow. So jump on that link, and if there's no questions, we'll see you guys Thursday. Davis is teaching tomorrow, so.
All right, sounds good. Have a good night. Thank you.
Yep, you too.
Thank you.